everybody. Welcome to this week's Mindworx Zoom. I'm Melissa. We have Ben with us today hosting and Mitch. I am currently a 7th grade language arts teacher here in West Des Moines, also mother to 2 kids, and I'm currently homeschooling 6 really awesome children. So, Ben, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm Ben. That should do it.
Right? I feel like they know already. Like they know, like I'm Mitch, you're Ben, that's Melissa.
I'm sure that we have new viewership this week, right? It's constantly growing, right?
Yep.
Well, when we doubled in Iceland, we went from 1 to 2.
Yeah. And Ben has a kitty and Mitch has 2 kids, and I got a new kitten this week. And my daughter Ella is in here looking for the kitten, I think. Not in here.
That's funny.
We have this idea, which is based on the philosophy of Sid Banks and the 3 principles, that, the 3 principles answer so many of our questions about our own mental health. And when we think of the 3 principles, to kind of, continue what we were talking about last week, our belief systems. Where do our belief systems originate? And who's to say that anything is really right? So, during this pandemic, I think that people have very strong belief systems, and how they choose to think about those belief systems really dictates the kind of life that they're going to live. And I think that you can still hang on to what you believe is right, but you can think about it differently to live a happier life. And I think that that's something that we can discuss today.
Well, yeah, and last week we talked about belief systems. We talked about kind of how they shape ourselves, and really we were kind of kicking around the idea of talking through this COVID. Here we are in Iowa, and we were one of the 6 or 7 states that never did a full shutdown, and we're already talking about reopening and the reentry for businesses to start. And you've got, we try not on this podcast to be political, because we know that we really honestly don't. We're not supporting one side or the other, but that has been a huge conversation of late. Nope, listen to the experts, listen to the doctors. They're saying we've got to continue and we're doing this too soon. And then you've got the other people that said, yeah, well, we've shut our whole economy down for a 0.1 death rate. When you compare it to some of the other major crises. And so it's just been interesting to listen and watch. And that's one of the things that we talk about, is that it's really hard to get away from ego. It's another term that we use a lot. And ego is that I am right. What I believe based on what I am interpreting as the facts, that makes me right. And so we were going to we thought maybe kicking around that topic. So is that accurate, Ben?
Yeah, well, so my friend, he posted something on Facebook, right, about how, he's here in Iowa and he wants, shops to reopen so we can start selling to people again. And right away, he started getting attacked on Facebook because, by opening it up, you're probably going to have more people who are going to get COVID-19. And it makes sense, more people are going to die. So the way that some people choose to think about him saying he wants to reopen is, oh, well, you want more people to die, right? And of course, that's not true. But when we allow ourselves to think like that in such a negative way, then that creates the energy around us. And I think that it's just so important that when we talked last week about empathy, it's really understanding the other person's story. And until we really know that person's story, you would have found that my friend certainly doesn't want people to die, but he has to put food on the table for his family. And the fact of it is, he may be going out of business. In fact, Melissa, your sister, currently, technically, she has a salon. Is this in Soho, New York?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us about that. So what, because she might be somebody who would want the government to reopen, but go ahead and tell us.
Well, like you said, I think that what we need to do when we see someone's comments on Facebook and look at their opinion is think about first understanding. We talk about seeking to understand and where that person is coming from in their perspective. So my sister drove here a couple of weeks ago from New York City for a lot of different reasons, but I think probably a lot of emotional reasons versus anything else. Her salon closed. maybe permanently. She doesn't necessarily know. She had to lay off a lot of employees, and she knows a lot of people who have had tragedies that have happened in their life, both mentally and physically, because of COVID-19. Her perspective is so much different coming from a hotspot than our perspective is now. So she, I know, has a lot of anxieties when we talk about reopening, when we haven't necessarily seen a plateau, like Governor Reynolds was talking about in her press conference today. And again, her perspective is very different than ours, because me personally, I haven't been tragically affected by the virus yet. However, I know that there are a lot of people out there who have. And because of that, they probably have a lot of different feelings than I have. Today, I was upset for a second, and I had to check myself because soccer wasn't going to be reopening for Ella in July.
Right.
Talk about first world kind of crazy problems that I'm obsessing over. There are people who are sick and dying, and I'm upset that Ella's not going to be doing soccer. So I think that when we see something like this on Facebook, we have to seek to understand, and instead of attacking, we first ask questions. Where's that person coming from?
And there are a lot of assumptions, right? If you reopen a restaurant, people make the assumptions that those restaurants are going to be packed. But when you actually understand the fact that it's only, isn't it at a third the capacity, or maybe it's even 50% the capacity, but people are keeping social distance, people have to wear masks. You know, when you begin to understand those precautions, then I think that changes the way that you choose to think about it.
Yeah, and you know, bringing it back to ego too, what we would talk about there is like, you know, Melissa, the second you said that your sister came from New York, this is what I did. I wasn't like, oh, I'm so glad that she got out of that hot spot. I was like, oh, she owns a salon. I need this cut, you know? And so like my ego was like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of this. Totally focused on me, right? Like, and that's what we tend to do. We tend to not look outward at the impact. We just think, what do I need? And so many of us think that.
So that's funny that you were saying that, because I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say that you were nervous that my sister had come from New York, which was a hot spot, right? And possibly carried the virus with her to Des Moines. And she did self-quarantine for 14 days, which is the recommended time. But I mean, a lot of people probably would have judged her for coming to Iowa from New York City.
Right. No, I was just thinking, wow, that could impact me really positively right now. But no.
Well, it has me.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten my hair cut yet.
Cooler heads will prevail. You know, I will seek to understand. I will probably think to myself, no, that's probably not the best idea. But you know, today actually for me as a building principal, like, and here we are mid-May, and I haven't been at school since March 12th is the last time that I stepped foot in that building. You know, today it was a little surreal for me because we had to I had to go in and to open the building up, and we had to have plans for our staff over the next 2 days. And my staff is about 45 teachers and possibly another 15 associates that signed up for designated times. You know, I had to create a sheet that said, you know, at this time in this area of the building, like we're going to have no more than 10 in the space at any given time. But for me personally, just walking into that building today was just a reminder of how big this thing has been, you know, and then being in there, how hard it was for me to leave my mask sitting in my office, but I still had people that still wanted to have that social interaction, which, you know, they're coming by saying how they kept their distance in the doorway, but it was just really hard to live in the new normal if that's what the new normal looks like for us. And you know, next week we're going into students coming into the building. So there's just a lot of things that you know, when we talk about reopening, not reopening, what's the priority? You know, what really needs to happen? And people need their things. People want to get back to some level of normalcy. But today was really weird. It was a weird day for me. And I struggled personally with open, not open, moving forward, not moving forward. It's so hard. And I asked, this is my number one question I ask everybody now. do you have someone that has impacted you directly? And most people to date here in Iowa that I know say no. But there's been a handful of people who said, yep, I have a relative, or I've got to know I had a custodian that lost a family member that was an elderly person in a care facility. So there are people out there, and I believe it's going to be like cancer eventually. They'll just come to light. Almost all of us will know somebody that's been impacted at some point.
I heard this is just about an hour ago. The president said that he expects that schools should be reopening very soon. And you know what I do? I always watch Fox and CNN, and I do it about 50-50. And sure enough, it was the exact same story told in two very, very different ways. But take a moment. And, first off, in the absence of knowing, we create the reality in our heads. Nobody knows what this is going to look like when we get to August, when schools are set to reopen. Let's just wait till we get there, first of all. And secondly, let's try and understand, if you don't agree with the president, what led the president to suggest that, right? And I think that when you follow that path and understand that he wants us to come back to a world that we knew, he wants us to get there. He's the president of the United States. It makes sense, the fact that he wants us to get there, but I also understand that maybe now is not the right time. So I really do weigh the pros and the cons and it's just fascinating to me how strongly we hold on to the belief. It's amazing that this has even become political. Isn't that crazy?
I wish it didn't have to, right? I know, but everything does, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And then of course, what we talk about in the class that we teach about social media, all of the things that we've heard on social media, I don't know what to believe, right? I really don't. But we choose to want to believe the things that justify our opinion. So, it's been fascinating to watch that and to hear that. And all we're suggesting is try and understand the other story first, before you start the negative thinking. And so my buddy, and how we started this show, my buddy, he wants to reopen so that he can feed his family, so he doesn't have to go out of business. Now, whether to reopen is right or wrong, it's the idea that at least you understand what his story is. Your opinion may not have changed, but I think it's the approach to that. We talk all the time about how we react to something versus how we respond to something. And I think that's just a perfect example.
It's interesting. And maybe next week, you guys, we all have brothers and sisters. I know that my sister has actually taken our class. She's gone through that process. Melissa, you've got your sister right there. I think maybe we should have a sibling Zoom next week where we each bring in our sisters or brothers that might be willing to give their perspective on this a little bit and talk, because I think all of them have been exposed, right, to our thinking a little bit and can at least give their perspective on it, right?
Right. It's also cool. I have a sister in San Francisco. What a totally different environment that has been for the last month and a half since this began, versus my brother in Chicago and versus me in Des Moines, Iowa.
Right.
It's been, and of course, the environment you live in obviously affects the way you're going to choose to think about an event.
Well, let's set that up for next week, you guys. I think that would be a fun episode that people would, I think, be entertained by. So,
and a teaser for next week. Now everybody has to listen and watch.
Yeah, right. Now they got it. They'll come back. So we are at about our time limit, guys. But again, as always, it's one of those things where the three principles, for me, absolutely has continued to be in the forefront. And again, I'm never perfect. I will even say from a personal standpoint, getting out back in the dating pool now, overthinking relationships and overthinking that kind of stuff. There's a whole nother topic there to talk about. But every single day, I am tested with watching what I'm doing and what it's doing to me, and either throwing it aside or listening, I guess, in some cases. So three principles are huge, you guys. Always, always, always.
Well, and listen, it's not about us, right? It was a gift that was given to us, and we've been fortunate to teach a class and to spread this message. But check it out for yourselves. The guy's name is Sydney Banks. It's the three principles of mind, thought, and consciousness. Go check out those websites. We have one, but look, it's not about it. Check it out, and then if there's anything that we can respond to, let us know.
All right. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us this week. As always, stay safe. It's lovely to see all of you. And until next week, have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.